Whether you're a midlife career changer or just someone who hasn't been in the interview game for a while, the idea of sitting down and selling yourself can be pretty overwhelming. But don't worry, I'm going to help ease those nerves and help get you prepared for that big day.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Welcome back, all my aviation friends, to another episode of Fly the Transition, the podcast where we explore career changes into the aviation industry. I'm your host, Jim, and today we're talking about a topic that has a lot of people feeling both excited and, let's be honest, a little bit nervous: the job interview process. Whether you're a midlife career changer or just someone who hasn't been in the interview game for a while, the idea of sitting down and selling yourself can be pretty overwhelming. But don't worry, I'm going to help ease those nerves and help get you prepared for that big day. So over the years, I've done a number of interviews as I've progressed through my career through different promotions and specialty opportunities. And in my current role in my day job, I do a lot of interviews for various positions and promotions as well. So while I'm not an aviation hiring manager, I am someone who interviews and hires people regularly within my day job. That experience and working with HR has given me an understanding of what makes a candidate stand out to us as well as what can trip you up. So though it's not necessarily going to be an aviation question specific episode, there's still going to be a lot of tips about how to tackle your nerves and handle tough interview questions. I will say, not sponsored, but if you are looking for tips and guidance on aviation-specific interview tips, there's plenty of companies out there, one being Spitfire Elite. If you listen to the Ready for Pushback podcast with Nick Fialka, he is one of the folks that is an interviewing coach with them, as well as a number of other great people over there. So if you're looking for aviation-specific stuff after you've listened to this episode, like I said, not sponsored, but Nick's a great guy, and he won't point you in the wrong direction. So if you're ready to talk about interviews, let's grab a notepad and dive into today's topic. The first thing I want to cover is interview intimidation. So we'll start with the emotional side of things. The truth is, interviews can be really intimidating, especially if you've been out of the game for a while. I want you to know that it's completely normal to feel this way. I remember the first promotional process that I went through for a position that I really wanted, and I remember how nerve-wracking that was. I really didn't know where to start as far as preparation, what types of questions would be answered, or how to really sell myself. But the thing is, interviewing is a skill in and of itself. It's not just about what you've done in your past roles. It's about how well you can communicate that to a person sitting across from you. And that's not something I necessarily understood when I went for these positions at first. So I had some bad interviews. Think of that as a learning opportunity, and with the right preparation, you can transform your nerves into an excitement, and I'm going to show you how to do that to help you be better prepared. What are some tips to help you manage your interview nerves? Before we dive into actual questions and responses, I want to talk about this hurdle that can be the nerves within the interview process itself. Just so you know, nerves can hit anyone. I've seen people who have interviewed very well in the past who get in their head and the nerves take over and it causes them struggles within their interview. So even some really seasoned professionals in my field can feel jitters at some point in time, and that can affect their interview as well. So how can you manage it? First off, preparation is going to be really important here. This is one of the most simple and effective ways to beat your interview anxiety. A lot of nerves come from not knowing what to expect. So if you do your homework, you research the company or position you're going for, you understand what that role is, and you practice your answers, you're going to feel much better and being in control of that interview. Remember, though, that preparing doesn't mean memorizing your resume, memorizing your answers. I would suggest having bullet points so that you're not sounding robotic or scripted as you go through your responses that you prepared. It's also going to mean knowing about your skills and how they could align with that job, that company's culture, or even the aviation industry as a whole, which can be challenging if you're not from an aviation industry, going into an aviation career and trying to figure out how to take your skill set and mesh that with what the aviation industry is looking for. Next, I would say visualization is something you should consider as well. A lot of athletes use this to prepare for big games, and you can do that too. So picture yourself walking into an interview, shaking hands, sitting down, and confidently answering the questions. When you're prepared, you're more likely to feel in control when the real moment arrives. Think about your posture, think about some of the nervous tics that you might have, and try to think of ways to keep those under control throughout your interview. Sitting up straight, good posture, can show some confidence as opposed to just slouching back in a chair and feeling too comfortable within the interview. Something else that helps calm the nerves that I've used and had success with is practice some breathing techniques. These are simple exercises that you can do before an interview to help calm your mind, calm your body. There's some science behind some of this as well. Some people suggest an inhale 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 seconds. But what I would do is have your exhale be just a little bit longer than what your inhale and hold was. So, for example, a lot of research says 4, 4, 4, but if you do 4, 5, 6, inhale for 4, hold for 5, release for 6, that act of breathing out longer than you've been breathing in helps to stimulate a certain nerve within your body that is going to help calm you in your body and your mind. So give that a shot. It doesn't work just for interviews. This can be used for a lot of different things in life when you're dealing with stress or anxiety. Some people call it tactical breathing within certain circles. So something to consider and have in your back pocket. And finally, have some type of a grounding object. If nerves can really get the best of you, keep something small in your pocket like a coin or a pen. It can sound silly, but having a physical object to touch can help you during those moments where it's getting a little bit more nerve-wracking than others. Just be careful that this isn't some kind of fidget like you're clicking a pen throughout the interview, something that could cause a distraction. So that coin or that pen, if it's just something that you touch or reference to go, all right, bring yourself back to a space where you calm down a little bit, you can try something like that. And here is the biggest tip in this whole space, especially once you're in the interview itself. Do not be afraid to take a pause in the interview. If you get a hard question, it's okay to take a breath, gather your thoughts, and then proceed. It's way better than rushing through an answer because you're nervous and then you start rambling, which is going to weaken your response. So instead, take a thoughtful pause and then give a confident answer that is direct, concise, and answers the question that's presented to you. All right, now that we've talked about your pesky nerves, let's dive into a practical side of the preparation of the interview itself. As you start preparing for your interview, here's a couple things you might want to keep in mind. First of all, research that company and the industry trends. This is especially important if you're interviewing for a role in aviation and you're not from within that field already. You're not just looking at what the company does, but you want to understand the industry as a whole. Is the industry trending towards a specific niche like cargo or passenger travel? Does that company that you're looking at have strong safety records? All these details are going to help you tailor your answers to reflect your knowledge and interest in the company and the field itself. Not doing research on a company in advance could be troublesome when they start asking you questions about culture and their ideologies. If you're able to speak to what the company is, what they're about, and their culture, that's going to be helpful. It shows that you've done your homework in advance. Next, you want to look at how your skills are going to match with the job that you're applying for. So take that job description and start to break it down. What are the different points? What are the different duties and responsibilities? And what are they looking for within that position? A big mistake that I see in interviews is a candidate who speaks too generally about their skills. So if the job is asking for people who can problem solve under a high pressure environment, don't just say you're good under pressure. Give them a specific example of some sort. In aviation, for instance, you could talk about managing an in-flight emergency you had or troubleshooting a mechanical issue during pre-flight and what went into your decision making. Transferable skills from previous careers can be a goldmine. So If you're in a leadership position, talk about those skills as well, because they're applicable in a lot of different aviation scenarios, such as decision making. These are just a few examples, but there are a lot of skills within your current role that can be transferable into aviation, and you've got a lot of life experience that you can bring. So look at your individual skill sets and figure out how you can match those with aviation. The next thing is, as you're considering these skills, think about a story or scenario that's going to best demonstrate each of those skills. One method that's out there is a STAR method, which is STAR. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. It's a really good format to use when you're talking about a past experience. So what we'll do is we'll talk about what each of these stand for, what you should be doing, and then I'm going to put it into practice for you with a scenario that I had occur within my own flying that I think could be transferable to problem-solving skills. So first is situation. You want to set the scene for the interviewer so that they can understand what we're dealing with. What are the dynamics? Next, we talk about task. So what is the problem and what is our goal? After that, action. What did you do to address that situation to get to a positive outcome? And finally, the result. What was the outcome? And if you can, tie it back to how that experience can help you in a new role. So let's put this into practice. So for me, we'll use a situation where I had a vacuum pump failure on a flight and how I made a decision to divert. So say you're given a question like, give us the time that best demonstrates your ability to problem solve. My answer would be something like, I was flying on a cross-country flight from this airport to that airport, and I was on an IFR flight plan in instrument conditions. As I continued my scan, I noticed that there was a discrepancy with the attitude indicator and some of my other instruments, and I believe that I might have some sort of malfunction. I then cross-referenced that to my suction gauge, which was in my secondary scan, and I noticed that I didn't have any suction, indicating that I likely had a vacuum pump failure. At that time, I had to take into consideration all the information I had in front of me and the information that I had gathered in my pre-flight. So I knew the weather conditions around me. I knew that I could descend into VFR conditions, but I also knew that I had other airports around me as options. So with all that information, I prioritized flying the airplane safely and conducted partial panel flight while I contacted air traffic control to tell them my situation. I asked for lower altitude so I could safely get into visual conditions. Once I got to visual conditions, I knew the conditions ahead of me were deteriorating, so I listened to various weather sources. I talked to air traffic control and ultimately made the decision I was going to divert and land, assess my situation rather than continue to fly partial panel into questionable weather conditions. While it delayed my return to my home airport, I was able to safely terminate that flight so that I could fly another day. That's an example of how you can take all those components, pack them in together, and tell your story. So let's think now about some common interview questions you might get and some good versus bad responses. I've expanded some of these examples to give you some clarity on how to answer effectively, and I'll touch on how you can tailor your answers a little bit to maybe make them a little bit more aviation related. A very common question is, tell us about yourself or tell us about your training experience that makes you qualified for this position. Obviously, in this place, you want to talk about all your different ratings and what you have in your tool belt as far as your pilot experience, but this is also a great place to bring in your prior experience from your past profession. So for example, for me, I could talk about how being in management has helped me hone my leadership, decision-making, and communication skills, and I can start to weave those into how that works in aviation. Obviously, decision-making is important. You still have to be able to communicate in aviation, so you can talk here about your passion for aviation too, and that now you're looking to take that passion to the next level by joining blank career in the aviation field. What would be a bad response here is just talking about, I'm looking for a career change, I've been doing my old job for a long time, and I just need something different. Yes, that might be true, but let's focus on things that an employer will be looking for as far as your qualities and skills that will best match what they're looking for in an employee. Another question that gets asked a lot is, why do you want this position or why do you want to work here? I'll tell you right now, that's a question you should have in your back pocket ready to answer. You shouldn't need a long pause. You shouldn't need to go, oh man, that's a really good question. That's going to show. This should be an automatic question that you're able to spit out. Take, for example, a good response here might be that I've got this passion for aviation. I've researched your company and I understand that you have a commitment to safety and your passenger satisfaction, and that aligns with my values. I'm also really impressed by the way that you develop your pilots and this or that program which I believe is going to help me grow as an aviator and something that I want to help fit into in the future. So it touches on that you've done your research, you understand the company, and you've also worked in here that aligns with your personal values. So that's hopefully going to help them see as well that you might be a good fit for what they're looking for. Another question you might face is, tell us about a time that you faced a challenge and how you overcame it and what was the results. So this is a great scenario to use that STAR example. So figure out a story that faces a challenge and then use that method of STAR to put your response together. So a bad response here would be like, well, I don't really face many challenges, but when I do, I handle them. You want to, again, take a scenario, work in your skills that you have in another career, and talk about how you faced that challenge and what the outcome was. You could also expect a question about, tell us about your strengths and weaknesses. How do you handle stress? Another one that might be a big thing here is, why are you leaving your current job? So be prepared to think about whether that's your passion for aviation, things like that. Don't just say, I'm tired of what I'm doing right now and I just need to do something different, or I'm burned out. Especially if you've only been in a different career for, say, 5-10 years. What's to say that you're not going to get burned out in another 5 or 10 years and now you've left them after they put all this money into training you? So think about that as well. Another question could be, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I would look at this question from the position itself that you're looking at. If you're looking for a management position, this question shouldn't be just about where do you see you in 5 years, but where are you going to take your team in 5 years? So say that you're looking at an airport manager job. How are you going to help develop and foster your team to a point where they're able to achieve their goals and their mission? So for an airport manager job, you could talk about not just, I want to be a successful airport manager. Talk about how you're going to do that through your team. The same thing could apply if you plan on being a captain at your airlines in 5 years. Now, granted, I don't know how that will look for each individual airlines as far as timelines for advancement, etc. But again, think about not just yourself. I'm going to be a captain and I'm going to be great and I'm going to do this and that and the other thing. How are you going to work and lead a crew as well as mentor those newer first officers as they come onto the flight deck with you? The last thing that you'll get asked is there'll be like a thank you and do you have any questions for us? There's two things I would avoid here. One, not asking any questions at all and just going, nope, I'm good. But the other is having a list of 25 questions or more questions than you were asked in the interview that you now then ramble off. You're only going to have a very finite amount of time to ask questions about that position because, frankly, you should have done your homework in advance to know what this company is about. So think of something specific that within your research you weren't able to learn and then ask that question. So something, for example, could be, what does a successful this position look like for you? Or what are your expectations of someone in this position? So after one, maybe two questions, you can also use this opportunity to insert your quote unquote end zinger. This should be a no longer than 30-second little thank you for the opportunity and a quick reminder of why they should select you. So for example, I really want to thank you for taking the time today to sit down with me and talk about position X. I feel that my prior experience as well as my aviation background helped make me the best candidate for this position, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with you all in the future. Quick, simple, to the point. It's brief, it's concise, and it can talk about how you can be the best candidate for that position. So let's talk about a couple of final interview tips to get you prepared for that big day. Dress appropriately. First impressions is really important, and you want to dress one level above what you think is expected. This should not be wearing a tuxedo to your interview like in the movie Step Brothers. As funny as that is, I don't suggest it. So be dressed for the job that you want, not the one that you have. Make sure that you're dressing appropriate for an interview environment. Next, I'd say have copies of your resume prepared and give them to each interviewer. So if you think the panel might be 3 or 4, it's good to have a couple extra copies so that you can make sure everyone has them and they're not having to share during your interview. More than likely, if you submitted this with your materials, they already have it, but to bring a physical copy doesn't hurt either. Next, I'd say follow up after the interview. If you're able to get business cards from them or you have a contact, make sure you send a thank you email afterwards. Keep it short and to the point. Thank them for the opportunity to sit down and to learn more about you today and that you hope to hear from them in the future. And then keep a positive attitude throughout the interview. No matter how tough a question starts to get, keep a positive attitude even if you stumble on a question. Don't let it throw you off and just try to finish strong. Each question is an opportunity to be evaluated again on that specific criteria. I've seen too many times where someone struggles on a question and it derails their entire interview. So just be prepared to answer one question at a time and don't get too in your head if one of them doesn't go the way that you want. And the last item that I'll add here is I talked about it a bit earlier about having stories that match your different skills, but do some research, think about different types of HR type interview questions, or if you want to look for aviation-specific interview questions, look at those and start correlating them with stories in your life that are going to best match how your attributes and skills fit to that question. It's really important to have a couple of different scenarios in mind for each of those types of questions so that when you sit down at the interview table, you know your stories, you know your star points, and you're able to just plug and play as you go. And if you use one story for this question that could have fit later down here, you're not then completely lost because, oh shoot, I already used that story. You got your backup. So you're able to get in there, have your stars ready to go, and tell your story. That's all you have to do. Sounds easy, right? Well, with enough preparation and practice, it should be. So that will wrap up today's episode of Fly the Transition. I hope you're feeling a little bit more prepared and a lot less nervous for your next interview. Remember, patience, preparation, and practice will help you feel a lot more confident. And again, if you're looking for aviation-specific interview coaching, I'd highly recommend checking out Nick Fialka's Ready for Pushback podcast and the folks over at Spitfire Elite. Again, not sponsored by them, just great people. So make sure that you check down on the show notes for links and resources for all those folks. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope that you will leave a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast and share it with someone who might find this information useful. The more we're able to get the word out there, the more people that we can reach and help out. So also don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode of Fly the Transition. Well, that'll do it. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Fly the Transition. And until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your dreams soaring high.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.